Diary of a Home Care Worker by Rita Nemo with Julian Hutchings. Episode 6. Monday. Families, don't get me started. I know everyone loves their mum and dad. Well, nearly everyone. My dad walked out on my mum when I was 11 and I never saw him again. And their gran and granddad and wants the best for them. But really, I know many of my service users are frail and elderly, but they're not stupid. Most of them. They can think for themselves and make their own choices and decisions, and they're not helpless. But you wouldn't think it the way some of the families behave. One of my service users, I'll call her Agatha. By the way, I don't use real names in this diary, they're all made up. And Rita's not my real name either, and I'm not saying where I work or who I work for, except that it's an agency, and it's in London. So don't go looking for me, because you won't find me. And my husband, or ex-husband, isn't called Tim. But Richard, that bit is true. I do have a son called Richard. Agatha used to be a musician and a music teacher. She's very posh and quite wealthy too, I should think. She has a lovely flat in a mansion block in a posh part of town, which must be worth a fortune. The lift alone is beautiful, all brass and carpet and mirrors. There are lots of framed photos on the walls of the flat of her with famous people. I saw one with Barbara Streisand and one with Shirley Bassey, and one with Michael Barrymore, although he had his problems and fell from grace, didn't he? But that's another story for a different diary. She was very beautiful when she was younger, was Agatha, but the years have not been kind to her. Mind you, some people might say the years have not been very kind to Shirley Bassey either, although I think she looks okay. I go to her every evening and make her something to eat. She has a lot of ready meals, Waitrose, Ocado, she gets a lot of stuff from Ocado, and that other posh one, Cook, it's called. She tells me stories of how she used to go to banquets and parties in Hollywood and Nice and St. Petersburg and eat oysters and snails and truffles and caviar, not all together, obviously, with actors and princes and shipping magnates and Paul McCartney. I was never a big fan of the Beatles, if I'm honest. I'm rambling a bit, but now she has microwave foods. We used to call it boil in the bag when I was a child, but it's all the same. Her daughter buys it for her. She lives nearby and she visits most days, which is nice of her, I suppose. But I don't know what she does on those visits. She certainly doesn't do any housework or make any food for Agatha. The carers do all of that. But boy, is she ever bossy. She puts labels everywhere in the flat. Do this, do that, don't touch this, don't touch that, tidy this, clean that. And there's labels all over the fridge too about what foods Agatha can have and shouldn't have. This evening when I got there, Agatha said, "Hello, my darling." She always calls me that. "Would you be an absolute angel and run downstairs and get me fish and chips? I do like my fish and chips on a Friday, and some mushy peas. Here's the money. And get some for yourself." She handed me a £20 note. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. B," I said. She likes me to call her Mrs. B. "But I'm not allowed to accept any food from you." "Nonsense," she said. "I've never heard such rot. I can buy you fish and chips if I want. It's my money." "I know," I said, "and I'm very grateful, but I could lose my job and I can't afford to do that." "Very well," said Agatha. "Suit yourself. But I want plenty of vinegar, mind." I took the money and went and bought her fish and chips and mushy peas and put it on a plate for her. "I wish you'd left it in the bag," she said. "Anyway, sit with me while I eat. Did I ever tell you about the time I met Errol Flynn?" She was eating her fish and chips and I was sitting in an armchair hearing about Errol Flynn at Capdon Tebe when her daughter came in. "Hello, Mother," she said, and to me, "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Miss B," I said. "I've just been to get Mrs. B's fish and chips." "She shouldn't be eating fish and chips, she knows that." "Why are you eating fish and chips, Mummy? I've told you not to have them." "I like them," said Agatha defiantly. "I can have them if I want." "You're not to have them. They give you diarrhoea. We had that discussion last week. And if you buy them again," she said, looking at me, "I shall tell the agency and get you sacked." With that, she grabbed the plate and stormed out to the kitchen. I could hear clattering in the sink. "It's in the sink," she said, coming out of the kitchen. "Clean it up and put it away, and then you can go." "I'm not a servant," I said. "I would prefer it if you spoke to me with a bit of respect." I'll speak to you however I bloody well feel like, she replied. I'd best be going, I said to Agatha. Please come again, she whispered. Don't mind her, she's going through a divorce. I'm not surprised, I said. I logged out. It had been 45 minutes, but I'd only get paid for 30. I was hungry and angry. Next time I'll tell you about David Niven, Agatha said. Who's David Niven, Diary? Tuesday. Hey, Diary, you'll never guess what happened. You remember Gertrude, that client whose son thought the carers were stealing from her, and so he installed hidden cameras to try and catch them out? Of course you do. Well, it turns out it wasn't a carer at all. It was a social worker. Can you believe that? A social worker. It seems that this social worker had been seeing Gertrude fairly regularly for reviews and stuff, and heard about all the money and where it was hidden. And this social worker was having an affair with another social worker and wanted to leave her husband and set up with the new one, who was a woman, as it happens. Nothing wrong with that, bear with. And so she wanted money. And it was her. I couldn't believe it. 5 grand she nicked. 5 grand. What sort of a person steals from a vulnerable old person? A cunt, that's who. Still, I don't suppose us carers will get any sort of apology for being suspected. No chance. Wednesday. You've probably not seen the petition about home care. It's closed now. And if you did, you probably didn't sign it. Not many people did. When I last looked, it had 22,861 signatures, which is one of the lowest totals on the government website. The highest was about meningitis vaccines for all children, which had got over 700,000 signatures. That's a good cause. I'll support that. But the next highest was a petition to ban Donald Trump from the UK, which had got 600,000. Really? There was also a petition to allow parents to take up to 2 weeks term time leave in order to go on holiday, which had got 127,197 signatures. These people are having a laugh, but I'm not. They already get 13 weeks holiday in a year, and they think they should have another 2. It's no wonder the country is going to hell in a hire car, as Albert said to me yesterday. But here's the thing. There's a real crisis in home care in this country, and hardly anyone seems to care. As you know, I'm not well off, and I complain about my pay and not getting travel time paid, even though I say it's not about the money, which is true. But I still have bills to pay. I don't get much money because the agency doesn't get much money. I know everyone thinks they do, but I've seen their offices and the cars they drive, except for the boss and his big Land Rover, and how many people they employ, and it doesn't look like they're swimming in money, so I tend to believe them. OK, they tendered for their contracts, and if they didn't think they could do it for the price they tendered, then they shouldn't have tendered, but that's not really true, is it? I mean, it's their business, and if they didn't tender, they wouldn't have any business, and wouldn't get any contracts, so then where would I be? Out on my eye, as Albert says, that's where. The fact is there's not enough money because the government is cutting back on the money they give to local councils, which is squeezing the price they want to pay for home care, which means low wages for me and short visits to my service users, which means your mum or granddad don't have the quality of life that they should have, or could have. But people care more about having a holiday during term time, or about a public inquiry into West Ham's deal to take over the Olympic Stadium, 25,529 signatures, since you ask, and they care a damn sight more about making cannabis legal, 236,997 and counting, than they do about old people. Will I be a better carer because I get a bit more money each week? No, I don't think so. Will I try harder or be nicer to your mum and granddad? No, I don't think so. Will I be extra gentle when I wipe their bum or feed them some cottage pie or comb their hair or clean up the cat's poo or make sure they have a drink that they can reach and that they have a blanket to keep them warm and the door is shut when I leave so that they're safe and sleep better in their beds? No, I don't think so. Will I be more cheerful when I say good morning and try harder to smile when I see them and say something to make them laugh and make sure they get the right medication at the right time? No, I don't think so. But just like a little stone dropped into a lake sends out little ripples, which eventually reach and brush the edges of the shore, no matter how gently and no matter how long afterwards. If there are more people coming to work in home care because they get the rewards, and the agency has more money to spend on staffing and training and decent gloves and computer systems and quality programmes, then the better everyone's lives can be. And that includes your mum and your granddad and Albert and Agatha and Maud and Clive and even Lady Gaga, but not George's wife. Friday. Something funny happened yesterday. I wanted to tell you about it. It wasn't funny, really. It was actually sad and a bit tragic and horrible, but it was still a bit funny. I'll let you be judge, Judy. I had a visit to see Albert at 9 a.m. I go to him a lot. Albert was a bomber pilot in the Second War. He's well into his 90s now. Hopes to get his telegram from the Queen. Does she still send telegrams? And he's not very mobile, so he uses the commode. I need to help him get out of bed so he can sit on the commode. There's supposed to be 2 of us, and I was meant to have another male carer with me, but he didn't turn up. That happens quite a lot, to be honest. It's a mad system, really. The agency gives me my visits, and they give the other carers their visits, and sometimes 2 of us are meant to be at a visit together. But I use the bus, or I did today, hope to get my bike later, and they use the bus, and I come from here, and they come from there, and they get delayed, or I get delayed. I mean, anything can happen. And yet we're both supposed to get somewhere at 11 a.m, and we get moaned at if we're 5 minutes early or 5 minutes late. It seems so unfair. I had to have someone come to my house from British Gas to look at my boiler, and they gave me a time slot of 12 to 6 p.m. 6 hours. So I had to take the whole afternoon off. And yet, because it's home care, we have to do things with 5-minute time slots. You go figure. Anyway, I got to Albert's house at 11, and the other carer wasn't there. I called the agency, and they said they'd find out and call me back, but they never did. So I waited a bit, and then I got the key from Albert's key safe and went in. "Morning, Albert," I shouted as I went in. His hearing's not very good, so I have to shout. I went to the phone so I could log in. Albert was in his bed. "Hello, darling," he said. He always calls me darling. I like it, really, but I'm not so keen when he touches my boobs or puts his hand up my skirt. I push his hand away and tell him he mustn't do that, but I don't think he understands. His wife died 10 years ago, so it's not easy for him. But I still don't think it's right. I told the agency about it, and they said they'd speak to him, and they sent someone out to talk to him, but he still does it. I'm used to it now and ignore it, but I still wish he wouldn't do it. I moved the commode next to the bed. He's on the ground floor. The house is 2 stories, but Albert hasn't been upstairs since his wife died, and he moved into the living room. I went upstairs to take a look and check that there weren't any leaks or damp patches or mice running around. It was cold upstairs and a bit scary. There was a spider in the bath, which I flushed away. There was a lot of dust. One day I'll give it a good clean, but I can't do it in the time Albert has, and I'm not allowed to do it for him privately, even though he's asked me a few times, or I'll get sacked. So it stays like that, cold and dusty with the bath full of spiders and the taps rusting up, and all his wife's old clothes still in the cupboard. Albert has children, but they don't live nearby, and they don't seem to visit very often. It doesn't seem like much of a life sometimes, but that's the same for all of us in a way. Listen to me getting all philosophical. I made Albert a cup of tea. He likes it milky with 3 sugars. That's a lot of sugar, but it doesn't make much difference at his age, does it? "I need the commode," said Albert. Sometimes he likes to talk while I'm helping him, and sometimes he doesn't. I tell him about my life. He likes to know what Richard is up to and what Tim has done, or more usually, hasn't done. Talking is very important for my service users. They're all lonely, and they don't hear much about the outside world except from me. Sometimes I think I rabbit on a bit, but they don't mind. I helped Albert onto the commode. I made sure he was comfortable. "I'll go in the kitchen while you do your business," I said. "Number 2, said Albert, which was more information than I needed really, but at least I knew what I'd have to do and how long I had. I went in the kitchen and did some tidying up. I checked the use-by dates on the food in the fridge and made him a ham sandwich. I could smell Albert's number 2 from the next room. It was very strong. I waited a bit longer and then poked my head into the room. "Are you done?" I called out loudly. "Yes, darling," said Albert. I helped him off the commode and pulled up his pyjama trousers. He leaned on me and tried to cut my boob in his hand. "Don't do that, Albert," I said. "I feel sick," he said. He leaned over the commode and vomited. I thought I saw something come out of his mouth and land in the poo and the paper. I helped him into bed and plumped up the pillows and pulled the covers over him. He was pale. "My denture," he said. "I think it came out." I looked in the commode. His denture was at the side, sitting on a bit of toilet paper. It was pink, and the teeth had some poo on them. I put on a glove and picked it out. "Oh, I must tell you, and I may have mentioned this before, but we used to have these latex gloves which were nice and strong, and the agency would let us take a box full. But a couple of months ago they changed to these vinyl gloves, which are rubbish. They're really thin and they tear very easily. We've all complained, but the agency doesn't take any notice. They say that the other ones are too expensive and they're not getting the money from the council, so they have to cut back. But it's not nice for us if we're up to our arms in poo and the glove breaks." I showed Albert the denture. "That's it," he said. "Give it here." "Are you sure?" I said. "Of course I'm sure. Why wouldn't I be sure? How am I going to chew without it?" "OK," I said, "but I need to clean it first." "Well, hurry up about it. I want my tea." I went to the bathroom and cleaned it under the hot tap and rubbed it to get it clean. I gave it to Albert and he put it in his mouth. "Where's the other one?" he said. "How many are there?" I said. "There's another one, the top plate." "I don't think so," I said, "but I'll have another look." I put my vinyl gloves back on and rummaged around in the commode, but there was only poo and pee and vomit and paper. "There's no more dentures," I said. "Are you sure it was in your mouth?" "Where else would it be?" said Albert. "Where do you keep your dentures?" "I don't wear dentures," I said. "You're lucky. Look again, darling." I looked again, but it definitely wasn't there. I told Albert. He was not happy. I took the commode through to the bathroom and emptied it and cleaned it thoroughly, but I didn't find another denture. I went back in the living room. Albert held up the other denture. "I found it in the bedclothes," he said. The visit had lasted 40 minutes instead of half an hour. I logged out. I knew I'd only be paid for 30 minutes, but what can you do? You can't just leave someone because their denture falls in the commode. But it still seems a bit unfair. I got paid £4.80 for that visit. That's not very much, is it? I tell people that I don't do it for the money, and that is certainly true. I saw in the paper that Paul Pogba gets £200,000 per week. If you divide that by 35 hours, I doubt very much if his week is that long, but anyway, that's £5,714 an hour. £2,857 for half an hour. I wonder if Paul Pogba has ever had to get a denture out of a pile of poo. Tuesday. Yesterday I found a gun. Let me tell you how it happened. I've been visiting Dudley for a few weeks now. Dudley lives in a council flat in a tower block on the 3rd floor. It's one of those tower blocks like you see in a Channel 5 documentary. Lots of people use the stairwells as a toilet, and there's syringes and condoms on the floor and graffiti on the wall, and there's always a broken pushchair, lots of cigarette butts and old football, junk mail, local newspapers, and those plastic charity collection bags lying about. Just like my house, you could say. Dudley is 90, and his wife is 92. She's in a nursing home, but he still goes to visit her. He needs help putting on his compression socks and a bit of personal care. He struggles to get around and can't walk very far, but he has one of those electric wheelchairs and still gets out now and again to see Ethel. His living room is very cosy and very warm. He has a fan heater on most of the time, and that constant blast of hot air gives me a bit of a headache. But I try not to complain, as it keeps him warm. He has a big TV which he has on all the time with the sound turned up loud. He likes Bargain Hunt and Cash in the Attic and those types of programmes and Come Dine With Me, so he's very knowledgeable about antiques and dinner parties and Fiona Bruce as a consequence. We have a good chat usually while I squeeze him into his socks. Dudley worked as ground crew for the RAF at the tail end of the war and loves to talk about the Battle of Britain. He has a big painting of a Spitfire on the wall, and his favourite film is Battle of Britain, not surprisingly, with Christopher Plummer and Susanna York wearing her 60s makeup. He told me about the museum in Shoreham in Kent to the Battle of Britain, and I went there with Richard a few weeks ago. It's a fascinating place with a little tea room, and they play 40s music, lots of Vera Lynn, and serve big mugs of tea and doorstep bacon sandwiches, just like in the war. I finished squeezing him into his socks and was making a cup of tea for him in the kitchen. I couldn't find the sugar. "Dudley, where's the sugar gone?" I said. "It's in the cupboard, sweetheart," he said. He always calls me sweetheart. "In the tin." The cupboard was full of tins. Dudley is a sort of apprentice hoarder, by which I mean that he keeps quite a lot of fairly useful stuff, unlike the really obsessive hoarders who keep absolutely everything, including food wrappers, hair clippings, used cat litter, junk mail, and those charity bags. I picked up the tins and shook them. Some contained biscuits or string, reels of cotton, clothes, pegs, elastic bands, scissors, different-sized screws, used wall plugs. There was also a tin of celebrations containing celebrations, a tin of Quality Street containing Quality Street, and a tin of heroes which contained some heroes and a gun. It was a Colt automatic. I'd seen enough war films to know what a Colt automatic looked like. The tin was heavy, and the gun slid around inside amongst the chocolates. At first I thought it was a plastic model like an Airfix kit, but it wasn't. Then I thought it was a toy gun like a child might have, but it wasn't. Then I thought it was a replica, but it wasn't that either. I debated whether to leave well alone or whether to say something, but I couldn't keep quiet, not with a Colt automatic hidden in a tin of heroes amongst the eclairs, fudge, twirl, whisper, and cream eggs. I carried the tin through to Dudley. "Would you like a chocolate?" I said. "I'll have a whisper, thanks, darling," said Dudley. "Take what you want." "Thank you, Dudley," I said, "but I'm not allowed to eat your food." "That's a silly rule," said Dudley. "I can give you a chocolate if I want." "Do you know what's in here?" I asked. "Twirl, fudge, eclairs, cream eggs, and the other one I can never remember. I can't eat eclairs with my teeth, and those cream eggs are too sweet. But I'm partial to a whisper and a twirl. My grandson bought me those for Christmas." "Have you looked in this tin?" "Why should I, darling? I know what chocolates look like." I held the tin out to him. "These don't look like chocolates," I said. Dudley looked in the tin. "My Colt," he said. "I've been looking everywhere for that. How on earth did it end up in there?" "I don't know," I said. "Are you sure you should have this?" "Why not?" said Dudley. I couldn't think of a smart answer to that. "Well, it's not safe, is it?" "Safe?" said Dudley. "Safe? It's perfectly safe. It's not loaded." He picked it up and held it in his right hand. His hand closed around the grip in a practised way, and his finger rested on the trigger. He ejected the magazine. It was empty. "Better put it back, darling," he said. "Give me another whisper. And please, have a cream egg. They ought to be eaten." Thursday. I've been on a training course. I've been learning about outcomes. It was all day. Well, they said it was all day. But it started at 9:30 and we had a half-hour tea break in the morning, and we had lunch, which was an hour, and then we had a half-hour tea break in the afternoon, when we finished at 4, so I wouldn't really call that all day. Still, all day for me usually starts at 5 a.m. and finishes at 6:30 p.m, so it made a change. I didn't get paid for it, which peed me off, seeing as I had to lose a day's work. Outcomes is the new thing. Did you know that? Up to now, it seems I've been doing it all wrong. I thought I was providing care to people, but it seems I should have been focusing on outcomes. How was I supposed to know? Nobody told me. So, what are outcomes, you want to know? Listen up, grasshopper. It seems that we shouldn't be talking about what we do for people. We should be talking about the outcome. In other words, what they get as a result of the care we provide. So previously, I would help someone get out of bed in the morning, but really I should think about the outcome, which is that they got up. They maintained their independence as a result of my support. That's the other thing that's different. I support people to do things for themselves. I don't do things for them. So now I'm getting a new job title. I'm going to be a care support assistant. I'm not a care worker anymore. I suspect some people will still call me girl or you, and George's wife will still call me a bitch, but I am a care support assistant. I'm not getting any more money, though, and I still don't see why I can't be a technician. It seems that some clever people in the government have come up with 7 outcomes. These are, listen carefully now, improved health and well-being, improved quality of life, making a positive contribution, exercise of choice and control, freedom from discrimination and harassment, economic well-being, personal dignity. Economic well-being? That's a laugh. What about my economic well-being? Who's going to pay my rent and my gas and electric and get Richard new shoes when he needs them? My service users are going to have their outcomes measured, and if they achieve them, I think they'll get even less support than they do now. So I think that what will happen is that someone who used to get a half-hour visit will now get a quarter-hour visit, which means that instead of getting £4.80 for half an hour, I'll get £2.40. So it doesn't do much for my outcomes, does it? Less food for Richard and for me. And I'm sorry, and I'm not being horrible, but most of my service users wouldn't know an outcome if it hit them. They want what I've been doing for them for years to carry on. Only they'd like a bit more of it, and they don't want less time, they want more time. A dirty bum is a dirty bum, and a clean bum is a clean bum, and you can give it any fancy title you like, but my service users know what bum they'd prefer. Now, you might think I'm being selfish, but I have to live too, you know. Am I alone in thinking this is the biggest pile of nonsense since the last great idea that smart civil servants came up with? You remember that story about the Roman emperor fiddling while Rome burns? Caligula, was it? Or Nero? Well, that's what this government is doing. The whole social care system in this country is grinding to a halt. There aren't enough staff. No one wants to do care work. Companies are going broke left, right and centre. People are stuck in hospital because they can't be discharged back to their homes. So let's spend a fortune on consultants and think tanks, and they can focus on outcomes. Genius. Get me a new fiddle. The outcome is that it's a mess. You've been listening to episode 6 of The Diary of a Home Care Worker by Rita Nemo with Julian Hutchings. Make sure you listen out to episode 7, which will take us up to the end of Rita's diary everywhere that you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening.